So why don't you introduce yourself, if you would? Where are you from and where'd you grow up?
Well, I'm originally from Franklin, Louisiana. So it's about 45 minutes from Lafayette. Um, Went to Hampton Memorial High School, but moved here for college and just kind of rooted my life here in Lafayette now.
And
So,
you went to college at UL. What did you
yes.
study undergrad?
Undergrad, I had my major was child and family studies, but I believe that they changed that now. I think it's like human development, but it was child and family studies. And then my undergrad minor was psychology.
So
So
it was already budding,
yeah,
right?
oh yeah, absolutely.
What led you to pursue counseling?
Well, in high school, I remember feeling off. I remember just not feeling happy, but I didn't know what that meant. And it felt something more than sad, quote unquote. It felt more than that. And my mom's a nurse. And so her being a nurse or coming from a health background,
Mhm.
she was like, okay, let's take a look at this. Let's find some resources. So I began going to therapy my sophomore year, I believe, in high school. Fell in love with the process. I really
Oh,
felt understood, heard, valued. And I remember sitting in her office saying, like, okay, wait, like, you mean nothing's wrong with me? Or like I'm heard. And so just that feeling has always sparked my interest of like, that's what I want to do. I want to make somebody else feel that way.
so it was a good
Oh
experience.
yeah, absolutely. It was something that was much needed at the time in high school, whether it was my school or just the generational part. It Mental health wasn't really talked about as
Mhm.
much as it is now. And so the words depression, anxiety, I never heard that until high school.
Wow.
And so that was something that was introduced to me then. And so it's like I took it and ran with it. I wanted to learn more about it, other things about it. I wanted to know the wider scope of vocabulary that had to do with mental health.
So
So
all things mental health
yep.
kind of got.
Oh yeah.
So what area of counseling fascinates you or that you're most interested in?
Um, I really have interest in those who have experienced traumatic events in their lives. And as we both know, trauma looks different for everybody. There is no textbook version of this qualifies as trauma. Um, but people who have experienced something that is shattering their own
Life
world,
shattering.
right? And it kind of makes them feel stuck. And
Mm.
so for me, it is a challenge, but it's a beautiful challenge because I feel like I can walk aside that person as they're trying to navigate through that earth-shattering, experience.
So
So
walking them through being stuck,
yeah,
finding out how to get quote unstuck.
correct. Right, and so and, we know, as we say all the time, we may not have all the answers. We may
All
not
right.
have the answers for that person. However, if I can just walk alongside of them as they are finding the answers, that's what, is just the most intriguing to me.
Well, and that's what I think, and I know you're good at is coming alongside of the client, right? Getting to know them.
Mhm.
They trust you to be there with them. And then you don't have to have the answers. You just have to be the courage to help them walk through it.
Right, right, and sometimes that's all it is like, I just don't wanna do this alone, and so that's what my job is, to just sit with them through that muddy
Right.
feeling.
And as you know, people, and I'm so glad you said that because people who have been through any kind of devastating experience that
Mhm.
we, would categorize as traumatic, you feel like you're the only one going through it. You
Yeah,
feel like you're the only one who can understand what you're going through,
right.
and you feel so all alone.
Yes, and that can be terrifying, and it can also feel so isolating, so much to where we don't even wanna bring it up, but if we can
Mhm.
just have the courage to, 1, get here, to possibly be brave enough to open up, be vulnerable about that, hopefully that person can feel that trust, that bond, and
Mhm.
again, like I said, walk through it together.
And you're really already giving the answer to the following question I had for you is, why is counseling important?
Yeah.
but you're kind of sharing that. It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
And someone, and you can correct me, or clarify, but I'm hearing you just say, I can be there with them. I
Mm-hmm.
can walk them through it. I can help them get through it and then get to the other side of it.
Absolutely. And it's important to, as we have seen, um, a lot of people like to come during crisis moments, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
something happened, let me get to counseling now. And as well as that is, and of course we're there for them, it is also rewarding when they stay and being able to maintain the growth and see the growth periods.
Right.
And that is that journey piece where you can come in crisis,
Mm-hmm.
let's work through it, but then let's also grow through it.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's the whole importance of what counseling is. It's that wellness
Yeah.
piece.
And and you said what I believe for a long time is that there's really three different kinds of counseling for an individual, but even for a couple or a family. It is that crisis moment, which
Mhm.
is the 911 help right now. And then when the counselor is able to help them, then they have a choice. They can either stop there
Right.
or they can enter what I call the work,
Right.
the growth mode, right? Where you do more of the work of changing and creating a life that you really want.
Right. Yeah. And you see it with your clients, but you can also see it personally. We all go through crisis moments where we feel that energy built up in us, but then we also ebb and flow where it's not as high peaked in that moment. And so then we're able to sit back and say, like, whoa, wait, did I learn something from that?
Mm.
Or where am I in this process stage? So it works for both the client, but also the
Mhm.
clinician to see both sides.
Right. It's a partnership of the journey.
Right.
And then just to finish, then my third one is once you kind of get to the growth, and I don't know anybody that really gets to this, that you're
Hmm.
just kind of in a maintenance, trying to make sure you don't fall back into old patterns,
Hmm.
So what's your ideal client dealing with? What is he or she coming to you about?
Well, I mean, I see a wide range of people, populations who deal with certain things, whether it's anxiety, depression, eating issues, communication. I mean, any type of things like that. But I guess my ideal client would be someone who is actually willing and able to commit to the process.
Mhm.
Um, whatever they're dealing with is their thing.
What do you think keeps people from being willing and able?
Sometimes stigma
Stigma of
of
what counseling
what
is?
counseling is.
What if I have to sit down and tell you my story?
Right. Uncomfortability, um,
Little fear.
fear. I mean, years and years of maybe negative self-talk where
Mhm.
we're having to rewrite that. I mean, it can be a lot of things that stand in the way of saying yes to something.
Mhm. I want to speak more of the stigma, right?
Hmm.
Of the things, because you were saying that they're willing and able to go through the process.
Right.
What if they don't even know what the process is? What is that process?
That's something.
Best you can.
Oh,
Well, what's it been for you? What's it been for those
yeah.
you've worked with?
Trust. I think it has a big
Mm.
to do with trust. Look, sometimes, I mean, that's something that I've shared with you, that trust is not an emotion that I've had to learn. Sometimes it's a choice that even if I don't feel the trust, I'm going to have to choose to trust. And so, for instance, with a client who may not be able to trust or see the process yet, hopefully they can lean in a little bit, trust either me, trust what's going on in the safety of the room, and choose that commitment. They can't see it
Mm.
yet. It is a big ask of them to do.
And I think you're hitting on something really important because we go back to what you're really interested in is when people have gone through such devastating things,
Mhm.
they've lost trust, not just in the things around them, but also in themselves.
Right.
And that's where that willing and able, right? Like I might be willing to go to counsel, but I don't know if I am
Yeah.
able.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah, and that's okay. That's something that can either be worked on or just even identified. Like, hey, look, I'm showing up, and that's step one.
Right.
Done.
And I think just showing up is beginning to trust again.
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I missed a question that was important, and I want to circle back to it because it's going to kind of lead us into the last part. Going back to being a little girl, growing up in Franklin,
Yes.
what's a favorite childhood memory that you have that you'd like to share?
I mean, I've gotten millions of childhood memories that are fun and really stick out. But I think the ones that stick out to me the most, whether it's mental health related or not, this one is, but it does sit well in my mind a lot, is the, I guess you would say, like, the yes that my parents leaned into. For instance, I was a sophomore when I start in high school, when I started feeling that depression come in.
So 14 or 15,
Right.
15 or 16, I
Right,
think.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I had my license yet. And again, confused, didn't know what it meant, didn't know anything about it, all new feelings. My mom being the nurse, she kind of went and was able to get me the resources I needed. And my dad, on the other hand, was along for the ride. He just kind of was like, yeah, what you need, going
Mhm.
for it, whatever. But one memory that sticks out to me the most was when he leaned in.
What did he do?
I was it had been like a week. It was during the summertime, and I did not want to get out of bed. I mean, a dark pit of a room was as cozy as could be. I
Mm.
said no to everything. Do you want to paint? Do you want to go outside? No, no, nothing. And my dad walked in, and he's a very, very soft, sweet man. And for some reason, he said, "Get in the truck." And I don't know, I perked up and I was like, "Yes, sir." Okay. So I get in the truck, and it was silent, didn't say much. And we're just
What did
running.
you think was going to
I
happen?
don't know. I don't know. I just was like being a teenager sitting there pouting, like, this is stupid. I don't like this. Like, you got me out of my comfortability.
Mhm.
And we just rode around Franklin for hours
The
and
big town of
hours.
Frank?
Big town of Franklin. I mean, we have
You can't do that for hours.
no, we have 2 red lights. So as you can imagine, we're going around in circles. But over time, it just I kind of like let go of that fog of like, okay, I saw this house already. But then I started to notice different things about the house. Oh, wait, they have a dog outside now. Or whatever.
Mhm.
And it was just one of those moments where we didn't have to say much, but it meant a lot. He may not even know that stuck out to me, but it meant a lot to me because it was just like I was able to get out of my funk. And so something that really stuck with me about that was, sometimes when I work with parents, like, that's the number. What can I do? What can I do? What can I say? Sometimes you don't have to say anything. Sometimes it's just literally sitting next to that person and just saying, or just being like, let's go, let's get out.
Just being in your
Just being
presence.
in your presence. And did I want to fight it? By all means, yes. I wanted to fight him. Like, how dare you get me out the house? But he did,
What
and
did that mean to you now that you think about it?
he saw me. He saw what was going on. He didn't have the words, maybe, or he didn't maybe know what to say, but it meant more because it was like, I'm trying.
Mm.
I'm just trying. I don't know what
And
to
if I
do.
can't say it, I'll at least just be here with,
Yeah.
or I'm going to drag you with me.
Right. Right. And so that's something that I still kind of practice today, meaning like if there's times or waves that I personally go through, I know and go back to that is like, okay, somebody, if I can't pull myself out of it, I have my go-to people, my support system who will drag me out. And I just think that that's an important lesson that I had to learn was
Mhm.
sometimes we need
That's
somebody to
another piece
drag
of
us.
that willing and able,
Yep.
right? To
Yep.
ask for the help,
Yep.
to be willing to go to the person or the persons.
Hmm.
And again, if you don't have that, then that's where we come in. Or if you have
Right.
that, but you want someone to kind of really specifically walk you through it.
Hmm.
So that was kind of a neat story, huh?
Yep.
Just kind of a reminder of just what we call the practice of the presence, right? Of
Hmm.
just being in someone's presence, being attached to them. Who's safer than daddy, right?
Right.
For you.
For me. Hmm.
And
And that's what counseling can be as well. Like we say that all the time is, or I tell my clients all the time is like, this room can be whatever you need. If you need a moment to have silence, by all means, we can just sit together. That's it.
Right.
And it goes back to that story. It's just like, I had to just sit there. I didn't know what to say. Sometimes saying too much scared me, or it was too overwhelming. But just the silence, just being in your presence. Okay, this was enough. This is what I needed.
And down the road, we can have a lot of fun with the conversation of co-regulation, right?
Right.
Like your dad was there as a calming presence, right? Which after a while calms you a little bit. Like you said, you start noticing
just
other
different
things.
things.
How neat.
Yeah, it was. And so that is something that sticks out.
That's really good. Thanks for sharing that.
Welcome.
You've kind of mentioned it, but what do you do to kind of keep your mental health or your overall health, your habits that kind of keep you on top of yourself, as I say?
Well, I think,
As best as you can.
right.
Nobody does it perfectly.
Exactly. We're all human. And, New Year's just came around. So we're all retrying new things. But I think it's been a collective of things over the years where I had to learn what works best for me. The first one would be something similar to what I just shared was find people who are in your corner and kind of come up with language that works for you. So for instance, sometimes when I'm feeling low or I don't know, just overwhelmed or something like that, it's difficult for me to say that and say, hey, I'm feeling very anxious. I'm feeling depressed. Sometimes I can't say those words. So my support system, such as like some of my best friends, my family, I just say, I don't feel good. And they know what that means. They know it's not a stomach flu or a headache. They know that that's my language of, okay, she's kind of low today.
So
whatever.
You're willing to name it to those core people in your life.
Yes. And they know, like I said, that short sentence of, hey, I don't feel good. They know what that means. And they kind of take action the way they each individually
kind of like the
do
code
it.
word.
Yeah, it's like a code word.
phrase.
And some people rather say, hey, I'm anxious. That works for them. But for me, sometimes I'm just like, hey, I just don't feel good. And it works. So that's one thing that has really stuck with me, is being able to just send out a code word. Another one is I know kind of what works for me now. Like for instance, with the whole depression piece, I'm a busy bee. I love being a busy bee. When I have too much rest, that's when depression likes to sink in a little bit and keep me in a room. But now, after years of experience with it, I know that I don't like to go more than 2 days completely resting, because then those thoughts start to come up of like, just let's just keep staying here. We're still resting. So I do allow myself to rest, but I know that I shouldn't go past more than 2 days for myself. Other people may be different. Just kind of know my timeline.
So there's kind of this inner knowledge that you've learned that one afternoon, one day could be really good, but anything more than that, and you're gonna start
right. I just start kind of fixating
falling
with that.
into that dark hole that you said, where you want to be in your room and
right.
crawl under your bed and not come out.
Right, exactly. Then I'll start staying on the couch way too long, and it's harder for me to get out. So for me, it's kind of like I know those dates.
So you've got an action plan.
Yeah, I got an action plan, and it took me a little while to realize, oh, that's what that timeline is. But another one of the biggest ones lately that I have learned, and it comes from one of my favorite books, Atomic Habits, is the 1% rule. And it talks about not having to give it 100% every single day. Being a busy bee, just getting out of grad school, I was giving 1,000% every single day, trying to wear all these hats.
Oh, you were running.
I was running around.
You were a candle with both ends and two other wicks stuck in somewhere.
I love being that way. But to kind of tell myself 1%, meaning if I'm trying to grow towards a goal, I don't have to do it at 100% speed. I can just do 1 more % than what I'm currently doing. And over time, that's going to gradually grow into a result that I want.
So just to do one thing.
Just to do one thing more than what I'm doing, if I'm going towards a goal.
Yeah.
So,
like what?
For instance, like if I'm right now, it's just going back to last semester or finishing grad school, I was burning the candle at both ends. So I wasn't taking care of myself as much as I needed to, or I should have been, health wise. And so that's something that I really want to prioritize right now.
Mm.
And so for me, that's eating meals, sitting down to actually eat a meal instead of grabbing a bar on the go
Right.
or a shake in the car. I want to eat actual meals.
Seated.
Yes. Stop, rest,
But it's the
sit.
one thing, right?
Right. And it's just one thing. Even if I start, well, and I'll tell you, I started at just breakfast because lunch and dinner, I'm on the road sometimes, but that's 1% more than what I was doing. And
Mhm.
so right now I'm kind of, getting to where it's like lunch. Can I sit down now and have lunch? And then dinner with some, so it will build
And
up.
I blew it for you today because you and I had.
No, but I
you
sat
had your
down and
lunch
had a
here.
conversation with
I
you.
know.
Yeah.
That's great. What are you mentioned Atomic Habits, great book. What are some of your other favorite resources like books?
Oh, Atomic Habits is probably number one. It's you have to read it.
It's one that Dr. Amy recommends.
Yeah.
Jules recommends.
And
I recommend because it's an awesome.
It is. And if you're like me, there's some self-help books that I just cannot get into.
Right.
I like a good plot, a good twist, and some of those just don't have it, right?
Sure.
So for this, it is more of a symbolic read, like uses lots of metaphors that grab my attention.
Mhm.
I use the Audible app, so each chapter is like 30 minutes. So that's like a podcast. So I can listen to it in the car, whatever. So that's how I got into that book. But it is a phenomenal read of just good little tips and tricks to think about.
Mhm.
And I use that in therapy all the time. So
That's great.
It is
I
good.
love that.
Other podcasts that I really have connected to is Hurdle podcast. It's really a athletic type of workout podcast. However, it's Emily Abadi is the host, and she interviews lots of people, not just in the fitness world, but also mental health world. So it's a wellness focused podcast that is like, look, if you're trying to go with goals here, let me bring in a psychologist. Let me bring in a nutritionist. Like
kind of a holistic.
Yes. I just like her approach of looking at a person's whole view.
Now this is an interesting piece because what we haven't talked about is that you're also a personal trainer.
Yes.
You're a teacher over here at Red's Health Club.
Yes. Yep.
And so it means something to you. It's important.
It does. And the word hurdle itself stuck out to me when I was searching for podcasts because I did track and field. I was not good at track and field, but I did it. And as we all know, a hurdle is an obstacle, right? Set to make us go, try to jump over it, try to get through it to our finish line. And that to me is life. There's lots of hurdles that we either get to stop and look at or we have to jump over. So that's a really good podcast that focuses on a wellness and fitness journey.
I love that, but that perfectly leads into my next question for you. What is one of the biggest hurdles you've overcome that's made you a better person?
So after I graduated undergrad, the plan was, right? Always a planner. The plan was get into grad school, begin going for this career because timeline says I needed to, right? I graduated 2019 in undergrad. So I'm like, all right, let's go full force. This is when I get married. This is when I have the plan was all written. It was beautiful. Did everything I needed to do in undergrad, did all the volunteer hours, got a 4.0. I'm not a good standardized test taker. I got 1 point minus of what I needed.
For the GRE.
Yep. Because I do have test anxiety. And, submit my application, do all of that, and I didn't get in. And that shook my world. I mean, the plan.
Talking about a plan ruiner, huh?
Oh, 100%. It was, I didn't know who I was going to be then. I was like, wait, this wasn't the plan since high school. I was going to be a mental health counselor.
So this is accumulation of years of dreaming about this and hoping for it and working towards it. And then the school writes you and says, sorry, we don't have a space for you. Wow.
It was I'll never forget when I got the letter, I had all these inspirational quotes on my bedroom wall, like, she thought she could, so she did, all of the
Hmm.
cheesy ones, but
All the healthy mantras out
right,
there, right?
right. And I went in my room and I took them all down because I was like,
They don't mean a
they don't
thing.
mean a thing. Why? Why?
I can only
Lots of
imagine
why.
you were crushed.
Whole crush. And also, there was no plan B because I was so sure of plan A. And so then it was, now what? What do I don't even know where to turn now. I mean, what career do I even like? Who am I without this? All the questions, right?
This is so important because so many people, so many of us, and I put myself in there, we've been through a number of those, right? And it's so crushing. You had your whole identity wrapped in
Mhm.
something. You had all your hopes, all the eggs in the basket, so
All
to
of them.
speak. And then now what?
Yep. It's like everything stood still.
And in some ways, to go back what we were saying, that's it, because everything stood still. It was very traumatic,
Right. Yes. I mean, it was. At the time I didn't see it as that, but I was like, now what?
right? And then scared to make any other decision because of what happens if I now get
Exactly.
rejected.
It was all of that. I didn't want to apply for jobs because, well, I'm going to get rejected. Yeah, I was rejected already, so why not again?
Okay, so we know you graduated this past December.
So it does
So
get better.
how did that turn around?
Yeah,
What
so I
happened?
spent a year working and really fulfilling job doing ABA therapy with children with autism. So I've learned a lot with that.
Mm.
Very rewarding. But something in me kept saying, it just kept going back. And I remember sitting down with myself and I said, okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to stay with this or do you want to? It just kept nuggeting at me. And so I said something along the lines of like, okay, well, you can't go around it. Like you can't not get in without applying. You can't not get in without taking the test again. So you either got to do it and get through it or you just choose something else.
How risky did that feel?
Oh, so risky. I didn't tell a soul. I just told my mom, who drove me to the test, to take it again. And so I did. And she was sitting out there, like just pacing back and forth. And I walked out and I made it on the dot. Like it was the perfect,
number.
number I needed, not a point higher, a point less. It was the number I needed. And I was like, okay, I did it. It just was that point. And it was so rewarding. And so, as we all know, 2020 happens and COVID happened and all that. So we started the semester after COVID starts. So I did start where the program at UL.
So like fall of 20 or summer of 20?
Fall of 20. And so we started online and stuff, but our cohort was really lucky. We bonded over Zoom.
And
But
cohort is the group of
yes,
people you entered the program with, right?
yes, entered with and graduated
Right.
with. So our class.
Right.
And so we did bond, over telehealth, but then we
Mhm.
also had the unique experience where we got to come back to school and we got to be in person. Whereas the cohort or the class that I had originally applied for, they never once really got to meet. Everything was online. Everything was shut down because of COVID. So now that I'm graduated and looking back, it was such a blessing in disguise that I was not accepted that first round because that was not what I wanted. I didn't want to be in a fully online program. I
Mhm.
wanted that connection.
Interactive connection.
I needed to learn from people hands on. And so that's what I would have had that first round. But this round, I was able to really engage with peers and
So on
learn so
that day
much.
that you got that notice that you weren't accepted,
Mhm.
could you have thought that you'd be sitting here at this point, finished with college and grad school?
Absolutely
Right.
not.
And that I think is the important lesson,
Yeah.
right? And it is the challenge is that you don't see a way through.
Nope.
You don't see a way out. You don't think it's going to turn out well.
Yeah.
And yet, that I love that little conversation you had with yourself, right?
Yeah.
You answer the questions, right? And you go, no, I want to do this.
Mhm. Yeah.
But then you know how much risk is going to take, right?
Absolutely. I had to come to terms with that and say, okay, if you want it, this is the condition. You do have to try again.
Mhm.
And this is what the risks are. You have to take the test, you have to apply. It's scary, but it's the only way through it.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
But thank you for that, because it's inspiring. Many of us have those kinds of stories, and it's so good to know, especially if someone's listening right now and they're in a place where they are in that.
Mhm.
It's not working out. Nothing's working out in my life. This isn't what I planned. Whatever it is, a broken relationship, a loss of a
Mhm.
job, or whatever, or an illness, even.
Mhm.
Nobody plans for that. But when we know that others have been through similar things, then we too might find the courage to get through it.
Absolutely. And then that kind of goes back to that trust piece that I was talking about.
Mm,
Like now, looking back on that experience, I did not have trust at all in anything. But now I'm like, oh, okay, I can trust that this process may be different than I
mhm.
anticipated for. It's going to give me a result that I may not be prepped for, but it'll be my result.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Um, Kind of winding this up, is there a question that you wish I would have asked that you'd want to, or how would you answer it? Or
Hmm.
is there something else?
N no, but I do think that, going back to who I see as clients, again, I see a different range of populations, little bitties, adults, um, so that kinda plays with it, but I
Mhm.
do also like to do play therapy,
Yeah.
for, not just the little bitties, but also the adults, and so what I want to kinda touch on is I do like to do sand tray therapy, which has
Okay,
to
so slow down. Define play
oh,
therapy
sorry.
in a sentence, and then we
Yeah.
want to go into sand tray
Oh,
because
so
some people may have never heard
right,
of it.
true. So, play
This
therapy.
is all in the realm of experiential
Yes,
therapy, okay, to
yes.
experience something.
Right, and play therapy, it's symbolic in through play. So, for instance, little bitties, they can come in and we have, um, not just toys, but, um, interactive pieces. Say it's a kitchen set or, a train set, dollhouse,
Mhm.
miniatures. And a lot of times, little bitties, but also adults, do not have the language to explain what is going on, the language to describe how they feel.
Mhm.
And sometimes it happens through play. And it may not be intentional. They just may be able to show us what's going on in their world through their play and through their
Well, it's kind
actions.
of like I say it's the other than conscious mind. It's the one that's being imaginative. Like
Hmm.
kids are so imaginative and they love to tell stories,
Right.
right? The metaphors.
Hmm.
The playing is a metaphor for something. And it's not just letting a kid play and have fun, but as a
Right.
counselor, what is your role when you're watching them play?
Well, lots of observation of just how they interact with me in the room, how they interact with the objects in the room,
The
um,
language they
the
use?
language they use. And my job with them, especially, is not to get them to talk or to get them to say certain things, but just to simply observe what it is like in their world on their level.
It's almost kind of like a pure fountain of
Hmm.
information comes out of them if you
Oh
just
yeah,
let them be and
yeah,
you're observing.
right.
So take that to adults who don't usually play well.
Right. So, for instance, I mean, thinking about an adult, when's the last time we sat on the floor or just played, right? But it kind of goes back to especially sand tray. And what that is a lot of times we don't have the language, whether it was a traumatic experience or just overwhelm, burnout, stress. We don't know how to explain that to somebody.
Mhm.
And so what I like to use is our sand tray.
So
Um,
sand tray is a real
It's a real
box,
tray of sand,
real tray of
and
sand.
we have lots of little miniatures. I should have brought some in here, but little figurines.
Mhm.
Think about like little army men, little animals, anything like that.
Dancers, anything and
Anything.
everything, right.
And so it's, even though it can seem playful, it's actually rooted in science. It's where our left logical brain meets our right creative brain, and they kind of intertwine
Mhm.
and come together, and they're able to connect language with symbolism and put it
Mhm.
together and create a world. Sometimes it can just be an expression of, this is how I feel today. It may not mean anything. It may just be a simple, let me get my emotion out. But you'd be surprised of a lot of things that do come up with that, especially with adults. We don't take the time to play too
Like
much
what?
anymore.
What can come up?
So, for instance, like, let's say one of the basic prompts that I give is tell me about your world through the sand.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times people will, okay, grab this for me, grab this for mom, dad, wife, husband, spouse. This is what my work looks like, whatever. And so there's many times where we like to just observe placement, observe location of objects in the sand,
Hmm.
what they chose to represent certain people as, what they chose to
Hmm.
represent themselves as. Sometimes it's not intentional, but sometimes it is.
So
So,
then do you interpret it or do they interpret
oh,
it or what?
well, it's lots of me asking those processing questions where I'd never want to interpret for them. So for them, it could be, oh, I chose a tiger because I chose a tiger, but maybe a tiger really means something to them.
And what is it about a tiger that you chose, right?
Exactly, exactly. So I always let them fill in the blank there.
Mm. So
Um,
you're helping them uncover its deeper meaning,
right,
right?
absolutely, yeah,
That's so cool.
right,
And,
and
and
basic
that
questions like
flows
that.
back to what you said about metaphor,
Hmm.
right? And analogy and story, just how important it is.
Right, right. I mean, I know there's been many times where somebody can ask a question like, "Oh, if you were an animal, what animal would you be?" Right? And everybody
Mhm.
kind of sometimes has that automatic answer. But sometimes if we sit and actually think, why do I would choose a
Mhm.
dolphin? Why would I choose a dolphin or a tiger or something like that?
Mhm.
It's just getting to learn yourself on a deeper level and how you actually do associate your world. And the cool thing about
Mm.
sand tray is you can manipulate your world. So if something seems too scary in the real world, like let's say I want to move jobs, it's too scary on the outside, but maybe I can actually play with it on the
Mhm.
inside, see how that feels. If it feels too risky right
Yeah.
now, I'll put it back.
There's enough distance between
Yeah,
it and reality,
right.
right? That you can do it.
Exactly,
That's so
exactly.
neat.
So it is neat, and it's neat what comes up in it. So lots of good processing things.
And again, as you said, this isn't just for children, but
Right.
it is for us adults too,
Absolutely.
who get so caught in our fears and in our anxieties, in our plans and our
Hmm.
crush plans,
Yeah.
right? That we oftentimes can't envision something different
Right.
or understand what's really going on.
Exactly.
Wow.
And I like to pull from that creative aspect. Again, following the client's lead at all time, but I do like to pull in some creative interventions in session to where it might spark something a little different than just simple talk therapy. Either can be effective.
That's great. That's
Mhm.
great. Thanks for spending some time with
You're
me. It was
welcome.
fun.
It was fun.
There's so much more to talk about. We will come back and talk about some of those very special things you talked about, specific things,
Okay.
and go into deeper. But if someone wants to make an appointment with you and see you and walk that process of trust and growth and change, how do they get a hold of you?
Well, they can call our office at
337
sorry, I forgot it.
993 1960, or
Yes.
they can go to our website,
They can go to our
which
website.
is
PAX.
www.paxrenewalcenter.com, or they can they can reach out to you by email.
Yes, which is just Ali, ALI, at PAXRenewalCenter.com.
Yeah, it's a big, long
Yep.
email address. We should have shortened it a long time ago,
That's
but it's
okay.
what it is. Allie, thanks.
You're
This was a
welcome.
lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for having me and asking about me. I'm excited to kind of keep going with this journey here at PAX, and hopefully I spark some interest of some people.
And those of you down in Franklin,
Yeah, be on the lookout.
be on the look for. She's coming
Maybe,
there.
maybe at a city near you.
Great. Thanks so much.